I'll start with a greeting. So good evening from Israel to all our guests on behalf of Israel Government Tourist Office in London, together with Worldwide Christian Travel in Bristol. I would like to welcome you all here today on this virtual tour to the Galilee. This evening tour would last approximately 1 hour, and a Q&A session will be at the end of this evening tour. My name is Amit Musai. I'm a licensed tour guide working for Christian pilgrimage groups and doing day tours with Amazing Jerusalem, which was awarded as #1 experience in Israel since COVID reduced tourism from 4.5 million visitors a year to 0, and the need to support my wife and 3 daughters. AmazingJerusalem.com and me collaborated with other tour guides to create online tours to the Holy Land, which you are about to experience one of them on this online tour to the Galilee. Although we do have a variety of other tours to the Holy Land, which you are all welcome to check yourselves. So this tour is by Christian Travel in the Bristol, and I suggest that we will start. I'll try to do this. I'll try to give you the option to unmute yourself, but only if you have like something very urgent to say. Take in mind we are more than 160 participants in this session, so I'll try that, and if it would work then it's fine. Otherwise, if you do have questions about anything that you see during this online session to the Galilee, please write it down in front of you. So take some notes and we can discuss that at the end of this 1 hour session. So I'm trying to do unmuting and muting again, which you have the option to unmute yourself. Usually if you're on a PC, you can do that by long pressing the space bar. So we'll do a screen sharing. It's not working, I'm sorry. The muting is not working, so I'm muting everybody again. Sorry. All right, and you would see my screen shared with you. In a few seconds. All right, I would use some notes. Do you see my screen shared with you? Yes, all right, great, awesome. So welcome to Israel, and today we're gonna have a tour to the Galilee. But just before we start, I'm just gonna give you a brief view of the land of Israel. This is a satellite view, and it's a great point to show you where Israel is located. So just a few seconds. Yes, this one is better with a 3D view. Israel is located in the Middle East. We are bordered on the west with the Mediterranean Sea over here. On the north, we have a border with Lebanon. On the northeast, we have a border with Syria. Then most of Israel's eastern border stretches from the Sea of Galilee southern tip all the way down through the Great Rift Valley, crosses through the Dead Sea, and continues all the way down towards the Red Sea over here. That's the border with Jordan. Another border Israel has with Egypt, crossing through the Negev Desert and beginning of the Sinai Peninsula. From this point, following this dotted line all the way here, that's the border with Egypt. We do have the Gaza Strip and the West Bank, which are Palestinian territories, maybe to discuss in another tour, not the Galilee tour, which is not related to those areas. Clearly, I want to show you a map of Israel right now. We're going to focus today on this area. The Galilee area is the northern part of Israel, approximately from the city of Haifa and down towards the Jordan Valley, the southern Jordan Valley, just below the Sea of Galilee, and all the way up until it meets with the border of Israel and Lebanon. So that's the area that we're going to explore today. And to be more accurate, we're going to explore the Sea of Galilee area mostly. Just quickly quoting some numbers regarding to Israel, if you have not been. So Israel is quite a small country. It's in about the size of Wales. That's 22,000 square kilometers with the length of 420 kilometers. from north to south, and the widest point is about 115 kilometers, which is quite a narrow country. The Galilee area is emerged between mountains here in the area of Nazareth and a valley in the area of the Sea of Galilee. We'll start with visiting a quick visit to Nazareth. So Nazareth is a city among mountains. I'm changing the view for you to see that we are in a hilly area and densely built area. In the center of the modern city of Nazareth, located a touristic attraction named the Nazareth Village. And in that touristic attraction, there is an attempt to create a village that would look like a village from the 1st century AD, the time of Jesus, as Jesus grew as a young boy, as a young adult in the city of Nazareth in the Galilee. So that would be a typical area of Nazareth. This is how may or may not Nazareth look like in the 1st century AD. That would be a typical interior of a house in Nazareth. And that would be a carpenter working actually in Nazareth Village. Working actually in Nazareth Village as a carpenter. His name is Joseph. Would you believe it? Joseph, the carpenter of Nazareth. He's using original, or at least tools that are based on the technology of the 1st century AD. For example, here he's demonstrating a drill. So this is a touristic attraction just to show how Nazareth would look like in the time of Jesus, in a very small portion of nowadays Nazareth, which is the largest Arab city in the land of Israel. And one of their experiences you can see here is the celebration of the wine pressing. So wine pressing in ancient times and in modern Nazareth Village that is imitating 1st century AD style, you would see people are pressing the grapes with their bare feet. I hope they washed them before, but this is how you used to produce wine in the 1st century AD. So from Nazareth, I'm going to take you into a journey, the journey that would flow over the area of Nazareth into the area of the Sea of Galilee. So from Nazareth, we're going to fly and follow this yellow line towards the Galilee Sea. Let's go backwards a bit. And just to see what I'm speaking of. So in the area of Nazareth, we were in the mountains. I'm following this line in an opposite direction. Jesus in Nazareth, he was pushed out of the town. He was not welcomed by the people of Nazareth, which were Jews like himself, and they kind of kicked him out just because he proclaimed he was prophetizing and reading from Isaiah about he to be the Messiah. Jews didn't really connect with this idea, and Jesus had to find a new home. For that, he would have to leave the mountains area and his youth town. He would go down from the mountains to the neighboring village named Cana, which is over here. That's Cana, where, by the way, the first miracle have occurred. And he would go towards the valleys. Wherever you would see colored area like that, that means that this area is highly farmed. It's a farmland, agriculture. In the valleys, you would also find the highways. Road number 70 of nowadays modern state of Israel is based on a Roman road that was leading people from the city of Nazareth, for example, down towards the Sea of Galilee. And we're going to follow the same pathway that Jesus took, going from Nazareth and finding himself a new home and a new ministry in the area of the Sea of Galilee. In order to do so, he would have to cross through few valleys, and I'm still following that line that would take us through another valley. This one is more interesting because this valley is the Valley of Arbel, and this I would like to show you in the northern Israel view of the structure of Israel, northern part. So this is the mountains of Nazareth are over here. I hope you can follow my small red pointer. And Jesus had to take this valley over here and to cross through Mount Arbel, which is a high cliff just above the Sea of Galilee. And then he would proceed to Capernaum, which is over here below we can call it a height area named the Chorazin elevation or Chorazin Heights over here, just above the Sea of Galilee, and we will visit that area as well in our tour. So there you go. We've just arrived to the Sea of Galilee. This type of walk from Nazareth to the Sea of Galilee extended all the way to Capernaum, which is right over here. This is Capernaum and the northern tip of the Sea of Galilee. That's about 50 kilometers. If you don't stop, it will take you 10 hours. It is possible to make in a one-day journey. I'll zoom out a bit for you to see. The starting point is here in the Galilee Mountains, through the valleys, the Valley of Arbel, and to Capernaum over here. And that would take you about 50 kilometers, 10 hours walk. Either make it in a day or two. It doesn't matter, just to show you that it is a possible path to take. Once Jesus arrived to the Sea of Galilee, he would walk by the shoreline and he will connect with a very important road that I will share with you about a bit later when we'll visit Capernaum. Now I want us to move to the first point of interest for us on this tour. That would be the Mount of Beatitudes right here. The journey Jesus has taken from Nazareth to Capernaum is quoted in the book of Matthew, and it says that Jesus went to Capernaum to fulfill what prophet Isaiah said. Land of Zebulun and land of Naphtali, the way of the sea, beyond the Jordan, Galilee of the Gentiles. And what Isaiah was speaking of is the tribal lots. Since the time the Israelites have taken over the land of Israel or the land of Canaan, when they came from Exodus by Joshua, the lots were given to the 12 tribes. And Zebulun is right over here. That's the area of Nazareth. Naphtali is in the area of Chorazin Heights and all the western shores of the Sea of Galilee. So this is exactly the area that Isaiah was speaking of. And he was also mentioning the road of the sea. That we will discuss a bit later. But Jesus went on that road. So the way of the sea beyond the Jordan, Galilee of the Gentiles. In the Galilee, we know not only Jews lived, but also Gentiles. Not that they were mixed, but encounters between a Jew and non-Jew are possible here. So now we're moving towards the Mountain of Beatitudes. It is located on the Chorazim Heights, not far away from a village that you may know, the village of Chorazim. And I want us to go now on a closer look. So I promise you, it's not just satellite views. Now we start with real views of the land of Israel. So this is the Mount of Beatitudes. We are elevated 60 meters below sea level. The Sea of Galilee is located below sea level. It's about 213 meters below sea level. And the Mount of Beatitudes that we're now at its top, we are 150 meters above the Sea of Galilee. As I'm turning around my picture, you may see now the eastern shores of the Sea of Galilee. Those are the Golan Heights, the land of the Gergeshim, quoted in the Bible. Down here, that's Capernaum. And below us, it's impossible to see, but located also the Mensa Christi Church or Peter's Primacy Church. And at the top of the Mount of Beatitudes, you would find a beautiful church, which is quite modern. It's a church that was accomplished in 1938. But it is designed in a Byzantine style, and that I would like to explain. But before I move to speaking of the Bible, I would like to show you some parts of the Bible land that unfortunately on an online tour, we cannot have the full experience of. But if you wonder what they grow around the Sea of Galilee, and those are the western shores of the Sea of Galilee, and this is the Arbel Valley, and Nazareth is in the surrounding of the mountains here at the distance. In the Arbel area, in the Mount of Beatitudes area, there is a lot of agriculture based on the freshwater lake of the Sea of Galilee and the very unique climate that we have here. So traditionally, what you would find almost every place in Israel is this, and I hope you can recognize the fruits. Those are olives that are growing all around Israel, almost every place in Israel. And I can actually point on an olive grove for you. It's right here. Those gray leaves trees are olives. One thing that we cannot see from here, but trust me, they grow it in massive amounts, mostly on the southern areas of the Sea of Galilee. And this is the southern tip. I know it's not very clear, but the southern tip is right here. And to go all around the Sea of Galilee, it's a journey of maybe 1 hour in a car, sometimes even less if there is no traffic. But what they grow on the southern areas are this, and I hope you recognize this. Those are the dates, the majhul dates that are famous all around the globe. So I can taste them and tell you if it's nice or not, but you would have to trust me. I'm not gonna eat in front of you guys. What else they grow here? They grow below those nets. They grow this. Those are not traditional plantations in Israel, but those are bananas. And the climate in the Sea of Galilee, it's semi-tropical, so it's good enough to grow bananas and also mangoes, which is now the season to pick them. And I'm probably gonna eat that mango when after I'll say goodbye. All right, so we're now going back to the Mount of Beatitudes and what was here. So at the Beatitudes, we are speaking on an event that is quoted, one of the first events of Jesus in the Galilee area, in the Sea of Galilee area. Before I'm speaking of that, I would like to speak a bit about the design of this church. So this is a Catholic church from the 1930s, designed by a famous Italian architect that designed many churches for the Franciscan Catholics, and his name is Antonio Berluzzi. He designed the church in a very unique way. When you think of a church, or at least a Catholic church, usually this is what should come in your mind. You would think of a basilica, a long building with columns separating the sideways from the main aisle, and there would be an altar at the end. And that would be the design that is typical for the Byzantine age. That would be the 4th century, 5th, 6th, and 7th century, not just in Israel, but all around Europe and Asia, when they started to build churches, when Christianity became a legal religion and then the official religion of the Byzantine Empire. So that would be what you would expect. A Byzantine church would be a basilica. There was another design that was possible, and usually that design would speak about a specific event or a relic that is related to Jesus or his disciples. And that would be a centric church or octagonal church. Octagonal church would be having something in the center. This is just a possible one. This is from the city of Ravenna, but I want to speak about this one. This one is modern, and it is designed on an ancient design of a church because it is related to an event that happens in a center. Jesus was standing in the Mount of Beatitudes, and we are not certain if the Mount of Beatitudes is the location that we now claim as the Mount of Beatitudes. This is the interior of the church, and the church is trying to give us an idea of the event. Jesus was standing somewhere on a mountaintop while masses of people were surrounding him and hearing his teachings. And the Beatitudes are the basic of Christianity, but they are supported on Jewish religion and Jewish laws. So what you would see here, first you would see the 7 virtues on the ground, on the mosaics that we see here. Some I can zoom into and actually show you. So this would be charity, and over here, for example, you can see this is one of the mosaics on the ground, and altogether this is what you would expect to see on the ground of the church. It's speaking of the 7 virtues that derives from the Beatitudes, speaking of Jesus to the masses. That would be the altar. And also remember, this is a Catholic church, and it is not very common for a Catholic church to look like this. The benches are surrounding the altar, like people have surrounded Jesus, and on the altar the offering would be the bread, which is the body of Jesus. When we look just above those arches here, we will see the Beatitudes written in Latin, and above them we will find a blue area surrounded with gold and some white. This would be the idea of the architect for the kingdom of heaven. We have blue, which is the sky, and gold is the kingdom of heaven, and the white are like doves, which are the design or the idea or the image of the Spirit of God. So this is the Beatitudes Church. That's the interior. And if you want, we can go backwards for you to see the exterior from an upper view. And you can see now it is an octagonal. If you look at the center here, you would find 8 sides, and on the top there is a drum, and then we have a dome. Remember this design because we will get to see something that used to look like this, but from ancient times. So now I'm just taking you outside, and if you want, we can you can read for yourself the Beatitudes, as we are taking a view of the Sea of Galilee again. And those are the olives I was speaking of, and those are mangoes, and I know that by heart because I cross them so many times a year, not just when I'm working with Christian groups, just out of traveling in Israel. And the Sea of Galilee is now a huge attraction for Israelis. They cannot leave the land, so they come and camp by the lake. Those are the Golan Heights here, and this is a picture from the summertime, and we are still on the Mount of Beatitudes. Those are the Galilee mountains. Let us see some other picture. This is a picture from the winter time in the Mount of Beatitudes. Golan Heights are in front of us. Those are the Golan Heights in the winter, which become green because a lot of water streams are coming down from the Golan Heights to feed the Sea of Galilee. This is a picture from just recently when I visited, and this picture is unique. And just remember that you see trees growing from within the water, and this is also not something, it's not something that is very natural, because those trees grow, or they began to grow on a dry land. How is that possible? You would have to stick with me until the end of this tour. Just the last picture showing you the Golan Heights from the Sea of Galilee before we move on to our next site of visiting. So this is the Mount of Beatitudes, and Jesus reached here from his hometown. That would be Capernaum. I would like to speak first about the name. I might say it in a very strange way for you, or not, but Capernaum, it's not the original name of this place, or at least this is not the right way to pronounce the name. The name should be pronounced like this: Kfar Nahum. I'll say it again: Kfar Nahum. Kfar is a village. Nahum is a person's name. But the name of the village, we are not certain who was this Nahum, that the village was named after him. We just know that is the name. But what you can find here fascinating is that the name that Jesus The place of the name of the place Jesus decided to reside at is comfort. Nahum is comfort. And Jesus was brought to bring comfort. So he decided to reside here at Capernaum between Zebulun and Naphtali, which were the original lots of the 12 tribes, or the two tribes that Isaiah was speaking of. And I was telling you that he took the road of the sea, the way of the sea. Look how this orange line, which is the same route I showed you before from Nazareth to Capernaum, or Kfar Nahum, now that we know how to correctly say it in Hebrew, it's following a road here, road number 89 in modern state of Israel, but this road is actually very ancient. Let me take you to another map. This map is showing us the land of Israel, which I'm going around with my pointer for you just to see the area. You can see some cities that exist till this day, for example, Jaffa, Ashdod, and Akko in Israel, and some cities in Lebanon like Tyre and Beirut, and some cities in nowadays Syria like Damascus, and some places that are ancient in the area of Mesopotamia. In the ancient world, there were two big empires in the area we can largely call the Middle East. The empire of River Nile, everybody knows that as Egypt, over here, and the empires of Mesopotamia, which were different empires depending on the time frame we're speaking of, but Mesopotamia is basically two rivers, this one, the Euphrates and the Tigris River over here, and those two rivers were also a homeland for great empires that were established here. To name some, Assyria, Babylon, and others. The Mesopotamian empires will always drive themselves to expand their kingdom, but into fertile areas. All of this barren land here, which you would see not even one name of a city, this is today mostly Jordan and Saudi Arabia, and it's dry land. Here, a very fertile land, that's the land of Israel. And if you already extended your empire to the land of Israel, you can continue to extend your empire towards Egypt. And the vice versa could also happen when Egyptians try to grow. They would grow towards the land of Israel and towards the Mesopotamian empires over here. Anyway, what I'm trying to show you is no matter what was the cause of who conquering who, trade was always there between those two empires because the Egyptians had stuff to offer to the Mesopotamians and the opposite. And who would be getting everything? The people of the land of Canaan, the land of Israel, Judea, call it whatever you want. That's the area. Because the trade route between those two territories would go through the land of Israel. This is the purple line, and this is the way of the sea Isaiah is speaking of. And I want you to see how next to this square here, that's the Sea of Galilee, the road is shifting up towards Damascus and then towards other Mesopotamian cities. And that's just on the northern tip of the Sea of Galilee. And this is the same place where Capernaum is now located. So I'm going back to the original map just to show you Sea of Galilee, the road of the sea. Part of it is right over here. It is called the road of the sea not because it's by the Sea of Galilee, but mostly because it's by the Mediterranean and going by port cities. By the way, it was the most common trade route until even very ancient, very early times like a Roman Empire. To compare when this route was established, it's like 2000 years after this route was established in the Bronze Age. Anyway, that's the road of the sea. And before I'm proceeding to actually show you Capernaum, I would like you to see this. I hope you can see the dashed line over here, and it says DMZ, that's demilitarized area. This is the territory of where the Jordan River spills down towards the Sea of Galilee. This is a demilitarized area between Israel and Syria Israel is over here on this side of the dashed line. Syria used to be over here on this side of the dashed line, which is actually going down towards the eastern Sea of Galilee shoreline. And I hope it is possible to see. I think, yes, you can see that. But this used to be a border between Israel and Jordan and Syria until June 1967, when Israel have retaliated against Syrian aggression towards the Jewish localities here and took over a big bite of the land of Syria, and that would be the Golan Heights, which I'm not speaking a lot about today, but just to show that Syrians have been pushed from here by the Jordan Valley to here to the top of the Golan Heights, and that helped to secure the state of Israel, the young state of Israel, which was established in 1948. But this is not the only border that was here. I'm going to show you how the Jordan River used to be the border between tetrarchies of Herodian Judean kingdom. After King Herod the Great died, his sons are inheriting the land. And if we want to focus on the Galilee area, I want you to look at this. This is the Sea of Galilee. What's here in orange color was inherited to Herod Antipas, one of King Herod the Great's sons. So he's controlling most of the Galilee and the western shores of the Sea of Galilee. And another son of him, Herod Philippus, or Philip, in the purple area here, is taking over the land of the Gergeshins, which is nowadays the Golan Heights, but also the eastern bank of the Jordan River, the northern Jordan River, and the eastern shores of the Sea of Galilee, quite similar to Israel versus Syria in 1948 and until 1967. And I think this is also fascinating to see how the Jordan River was a natural border. So you can see it today. This is the line I was speaking of in the map of Israel. But nowadays the border is not here anymore by the Jordan River and just above Capernaum, but actually here on this blue area, that's the Golan Heights. And if you want to go even further back in time, before the time of Herod, I'm taking you back to the tribal lots and see how Naphtali and the half of Menashe are splitted just here on the northern tip of the Sea of Galilee at the Jordan River. Let's go and see how it looks like in reality as we are diving down in the closest city to this borderland between Antipas and Philip. That would be Capernaum. And why I gave you so much introduction to this area, because Jesus not by chance arrived to here, to Capernaum. He chose the place, and he knew that here he has an opportunity to meet not just Jews, but also Gentiles. So when he arrived to Capernaum, and you can read about it in Matthew 4, Jesus went throughout the Galilee. News about him spread all over Syria. That's not the Judean kingdom, not the territory that Jesus was belonging to as a person. And large crowds from the Galilee, the Decapolis, Jerusalem, Judea, and the region across the Jordan followed him. So here he had an opportunity to speak to much larger crowd. And the idea is that here it was a border town between Philip and Antipas territories. In a border town, you would also find tax collectors. What I'm showing you in this picture behind those bars is not very clear, I know. That's because we have a piece of archaeology that you might be interested in, but nowadays above it, hovering, is a Catholic church, which is also not very typical Catholic church, but you would find a lot of things that are not very typical to what you may know in Europe that are in the land of Israel. This is Capernaum, and we'll take 3 visits here, 3 sites that we're gonna see. We'll start with the first one, so I have a better picture of this from the 1980s. And after the area of Capernaum was excavated in the late 19th century and more in the late 20th century, one of the main discoveries by the residential area is this very strange building. It looks maybe like a place that used to be a land place for helicopters, or I don't know, for UFOs. But what you see here, it's an octagonal church. We spoke about one octagonal church at the Beatitudes and we saw it. This one is ancient. And this is just the basis of what survived from the 8th century AD. 749, it is quoted that Israel had a big earthquake on the Jordan River by the Sea of Galilee. It's actually a rift valley, so tectonic plates are always moving here. And that destroyed what was built in probably the 4th or 5th centuries AD, the Byzantine age, the first era that Christianity is actually allowed as a religion and then became to be the official religion. That's the residential area of Capernaum. We'll visit also. This is what stands on top of that octagonal that I've just showed you. And this actually looks like a UFO, but that's a Catholic church. Within the church, this is what you expect to see. That's the altar. But the real center of this church is what's below this window, which is the relics I've just showed you. And it is possible that in the 4th or 5th centuries AD and until 749 AD, something similar to this have stood in Capernaum, a church. But what the church is dedicated for, I will explain very soon. Again, that the design of an octagonal church, you can see now how this part of the diagram is possible to what I'm showing you here. So what is commemorated here? First, we need to go to Matthew. And in Matthew, we read this. Jesus came into Peter's house. He saw Peter's mother-in-law lying in bed with fever. He touched her hand and the fever left her. And she got up and began to wait on him. So Jesus creates miracle in a place which was either Peter's or Peter's mother-in-law house. And later in Matthew 9, we read this. Jesus stepped into a boat, crossed over the Sea of Galilee, perhaps from the eastern shores or the western shores, and came to his own town. And we speak about Capernaum when we speak about Jesus' own town. This place was highly celebrated as the place of Jesus' home, where he stayed, where he accepted people who came to pray with him, where he accepted people to heal. And that would be the home. It's not that he lived in an octagonal home. I'm going to show you very soon how a typical home from the 1st century AD would look like. But before I go there, what happened here is Jesus was in a typical home. After Jesus ascended to heavens, the place is being worshipped by Judeo-Christians. The first Christians in the world were Jews who accepted Jesus as their Messiah. And they look for the places where Jesus was at. And they arrive to Capernaum. And they secretly worship in that home. So that would be a home church, you can call it. In Latin, the term would be Domus Ecclesia. And this is what we're looking at. Only when the Byzantines have occupied the Roman Empire, the land of Israel, or the Judean kingdom from the Roman Empire, the place became to be an actual church, which was built like an octagonal. And in the center, the altar was to commemorate the place where Jesus was sitting and healing people. So this is the first portion of Capernaum that we've just experienced. And I remind you, I know I had to mute you. It's a very big session. But if you have questions, please write them down and we'll do Q&As at the end of this tour. From here, I would like to proceed to our next area we're experiencing here in Capernaum. And that would be the residential area behind those bars. By the way, I was speaking about the dates, remember? Dates, so now we can see an actual palm tree that produced dates, but this one is not for agriculture, it's just for the beauty of it. So now we've just been here under this very modern UFO style church, which is Catholic, but it is built in this design just for people to see what's under, which is the remnants of the ancient church, which is the home where Jesus stayed. And this is the residential area. How do I know that? Well, I don't. I trust archaeologists, but also look at this. Look at those squares here. You're going to see them in the diagram I'm going to show you now. In this diagram, you can get an idea how a typical home from the 1st century AD all around Israel would look like, but specifically in the Galilee. So it is a house that is made from local stones or some mud even. And those are the squares I showed you in reality. Those are windows that allow the wind to flow from one side of the home to the other side. And on the lower level, there would be 4 areas. There would be the courtyard, the kitchen and the storeroom. And then above that, on the pillars, you would find what is called the upper room. And I know this might ring a bell for you. The upper room was a typical living room in a domestic area in all around the land of Israel. But I want you to note this because this is something I'm going to speak about. Look at the rooftop, please. The rooftop is made of slats of wood, which are covered with straw, and in the winter are also introduced with some mud at the top so the rain would not go inside. But this kind of a rooftop, it's a rooftop that you can take out very easily, and it is actually quoted in the Bible. So if we read from Luke, we read that masses of people came to Jesus' home, which was right here, but now I can show you that because a huge church is covering. So we'll refer to that because Jesus' home would be something similar to what I've showed you in that diagram here. And what we read in Luke 5, some men came carrying a paralyzed man on a mat and tried to take him into the house to lay him before Jesus. The entrance was crowded, and see how densely this area is built. And the domestic portion of a house would be from this wall to this wall, and then it would be on a small alley moving to another house which starts over here. So you can imagine that it was crowded. Even if it was only 10 or 15 or 100 people, that would be considered very crowded. And those friends of the paralyzed man, they went up on the roof and lowered him on his mat through the tiles into the middle of the crowd, right in front of Jesus. And then Jesus say, "Friend, your sins are forgiven." And the person took his mat and walked. But I want to speak about how is that possible even to take off the tiles from the rooftop. Well, like, I'm sure that no matter where you're sitting, if you look up, it's made of stone, whatever is above you. And even if it's made of wood, it won't be very easily taken apart to introduce a paralyzed man on a mat in just a few minutes. So how is that possible? This rooftop is made from slats, which you can take off the straw covering very easily, and then take someone down. Why it's even possible to make that? Because burglar can come into your house in the same way. You don't want that to happen. But in Judaism, Jews are celebrating the feast of the Tabernacle. It's a feast to commemorate the time when Jews were walking in the desert, following Moses for 40 years, and living in temporarily built tabernacles. The holiday to commemorate that commands every Jew to have 7 days of his life, of the year, that's Sukkot in Hebrew, tabernacles. Usually it falls on September or October, just before the first rains. And part of the commanding is you should create an area in your home or outside of your home where it would be possible to look to the skies and see the stars. It would be impossible when the rooftop is covered with straw, but once you remove the straw, which would look like this, and this is from Nazareth Village, the straw would be removed. You can see the gap here is quite big to take down a paralyzed man on his mat and bring him directly in front of Jesus and bypass the huge crowds that were standing somewhere around here. Perhaps that was the original house, which is a tradition from the 1st century AD, and it's strong enough for us to rely on. So from this domestic area and from the story in Luke, I'm moving on to the last place of visit, which looks a bit different from what we saw till this point. Both the Byzantine Church and this domestic area here are made from the local basalite stone. It's a volcanic stone that is a result of ancient eruptions. But here we see something different. This is white, and this is definitely not the local stone in the area of Capernaum. Why is that? Let's explore. So now we're inside. Those people here are leaning against the bars that are taking you towards the domestic area. And what you would see here, that's the Synagogue of Capernaum. This is a synagogue which is quite fancy in the way it is built. It is a synagogue that perhaps look like what I'm showing you here in the small picture, which is the model of Capernaum synagogue, or at least how the archaeologists suggest it would be looking like. And it is not the only synagogue in the Galilee. So this model is supported on other synagogues, similar more or less to what you see here. This is a synagogue from after the time of Jesus on earth. This is a synagogue from the 5th century, the Byzantine age, where Christianity was already the major religion in this area. And the synagogue is built with huge pillars. It used to be 2 levels at least, and an open court outside. Let me take you to the open court for a second. So outside of this gateway, and we are in another part of the synagogue. This was, by the way, without any rooftop. And this hatch is where we came from. And look at the decorations over here. So this is a synagogue for some wealthy people, or at least people who desired masses would come here. And why we have a synagogue from a time when Christianity is already the dominating religion on this region. So this synagogue was probably built together with the Octagonal Church, and maybe to withdraw pilgrims to see, besides of the church, also the synagogue where Jesus was preaching, because it is quoted in Mark, for example. They went to Capernaum, or Kfar Nahum, and when Sabbath came, Sabbath is the holiday for the Jews, Jesus went into the synagogue and began to teach, which is what a rabbi would do to his community. He would teach during the Shabbat, the time when Jews are gathering in the synagogue and praying together. So this was built probably as a touristic attraction back in the time of the Byzantine age, and survived until that horrible earthquake of 749 AD. But it is very possible that below the establishment of this synagogue stands the place where Jesus really preached, because it's the highest place in town, and accordingly to the Jewish law, you built your synagogues on the top of the hill or the top of the town. So this is a model suggesting how Capernaum synagogue would look like in the 5th century AD probably. And this is relics of a synagogue from the 1st century AD, from the time of Jesus, or at least a few decades after he ascended to heavens. And it's not far away from what you saw in Capernaum, but you must admit it's much more modest. So see the pillars here, and see the benches on the sides where people would sit during the prayer time, facing towards Jerusalem. This one is from Herodion, which is nearby Jerusalem. This synagogue is from the Golan Heights, the city of Gamla, and you can already see the resemblance just from a quick view. See those stepped area, those are benches for the masses to sit on, but this one is actually also very, very modest, and it is made from a local stone. So why they've built here from not a local stone, it's still a mystery among archaeologists, but some claim it was already built up a basilica somewhere else. It was not in use anymore, so people have just taken the stones and imported them here. It's possible. Or maybe they've decided to build in a non-local stone just to show the greatness of this place, a place that is related with where Jesus was preaching to the masses. So from here, we're gonna jump now from Capernaum or Kfar Nahum to another area, And if we speak about the distances at the northern tip of the Sea of Galilee, and usually when you come to Israel on a pilgrimage tour, possible to make with Christian Travel, our host for this online tour, from the Beatitudes to Capernaum, maybe 10-15 minutes ride. From Capernaum to Peter's Primacy, or largely I can call the area Tabgha, it's like less than 10 minutes drive. And this would be the area of Jesus' ministry, besides of other places in the Galilee that are quoted, and some most probably are not quoted, and it just generally says many times in the Bible that Jesus was ministering all around the Galilee and even outside of the Galilee, as some events are speaking about the Gergeshing land, which are the eastern shores just below the Golan Heights around this territory here. But now I would like us to go to Tabgha. In Tabgha, actually, there are two main locations which both have churches. We're going to speak about one today. I'll just mention generally that in Tabgha, we also show the place of the multitudes, but in a 1 hour online tour, it would be impossible for me to accomplish. So I'm showing you one of the two churches. And actually for this one, I'm not even gonna enter, as this church is the Primacy of Peter's Church, which you can see over here. It's a very modest church. It's a Catholic church by the Franciscan order. It is made from the local basalite stone, but also here notice this. Look at these rocks over here. They are quite not relevant to the location. The style of the type of the rock here is travertinos. It's a rock that is created because of minerals in running water from natural springs. And it was condensed here. And largely to speak about the location name is Tabgha. Tabgha in Aramaic is the word seven, in Hebrew, Sheva. So the area is called Tabgha after the 7 springs that are here. Springs that brings a lot of minerals down to the Sea of Galilee. And look how beautiful the Sea of Galilee is in this picture. And I'm excited because the Sea of Galilee is always beautiful. But I'm going to show you a picture that it's not looking like this. So those springs are bringing minerals to the water, and minerals withdraw life. So this area is with abundance of fish nowadays, and also 2,000 years ago. And this is why that's the ministry of Jesus, because he was among fishermen. And we're going to discuss that in a second. But the event quoted in this church, Peter's Primacy Church, also known as in Latin Mensa Christi, the Feast of the Lord. So I'm reading parts of John 21. Afterwards, Jesus appeared again to his disciples. So we are speaking after the resurrection by the Sea of Galilee. They went out and got into the boat. Early in the morning, Jesus stood on the shore, but the disciples did not realize that it was Jesus, besides of Peter, who jumped to the water and swam towards him. When they landed, they saw a fire of burning coals there with a fish on it and some bread. So Jesus is making food for his beloved disciples. And then he and Peter has a conversation about love. Jesus asked Peter, "Do you love me?" Asked him 3 times, and Peter admits 3 times, "I love you." And the reason this is called Peter's Primacy Church, because after this event of saying "I love you" 3 times to Jesus by Peter, Jesus tell him, or at least tell it for the second time after Caesarea Philippi, "You get the kingdom of heaven, keys from me, you would be the church on earth." So this is where Peter receives his primacy, and according to the Catholic denomination, Peter is the first pope after he left from the land of Israel towards Rome. I was speaking about this specific type of a natural stone. It is white. Imagine over this stone coals fire. This is something that during the very early morning is visible to differ from those black rocks all around us, the basalt stones, from not far away in the distance, but maybe like the boat over here. This is not a, oh, the picture is now changing. This boat is, it's not a fisherman's boat, but it is designed on a fisherman boat that was discovered here. So let me tell you the story of the Galilee boat, or what we know as the Jesus boat. What you see here, it's an amazing remnant that was discovered in 1986 on the western shores of the Sea of Galilee, not far away from Tabgha or Capernaum. And that was discovered in a year that there was a huge drought. The water level reduced dramatically. And two local people from Kibbutz Genosar, they went on the beach to try and find some ancient coins and stuff like that, and they did. And then they found some nails, and then they start to dig down in the ground to discover a body of an ancient boat. With a huge operation, they've made a digging, bringing marine archaeologists from different places in the world, and they floated this with polyurethane, which is it's a chemical foam. They floated this into a place to start and work on the body of the boat. And what they've discovered, this one is dated to the 1st century AD. So it is very possible that this boat was serving as a fisherman's boat on the Sea of Galilee water in the time of Jesus, maybe by his disciples. Maybe Jesus was on this specific boat, that I cannot assure you yes or not. But what else is interesting is that in the body of the boat they found exactly 12 types of wood that this boat was made of. Take it to whatever 12 you know, the tribes of Israel, the 12 disciples. So this is the Galilee boat. And this is a small model that you can see how the boat would be like when it was completed. Unfortunately, only these have survived. And this you can see just before you take a boat ride from the Genosar Museum, which is not far away from Capernaum. And the last thing I would like to show you during this tour, and I want you to focus on the picture here. This picture is from after the winter of 2018, which was an abundant winter, also the winter of 2019. And I have one pastor that I work with that said to me that it is possible that the rains came because he came to visit Israel after so many years. I don't know, but that's also possible. But look at this eucalyptus tree and see the distance from the water. It's about like maybe 3 meters here. The next picture, where are the water now? This is the same eucalyptus tree. We are on the same location, just to make you believe me. This is Peter's Primacy Church we've just experienced. And look at the eucalyptus tree. Look at the distance from the water. This picture is from 2016. This is the water level. It is not the same 2 or 3 meters that water are now at, but much far from there. It's like almost like 10 or 15 meters. And this is a very, very sad picture. And this is a very sad period of time in the time of Israel, when the Sea of Galilee is going down like that. All the people around it are supported by the Sea of Galilee, from people working in tourism to people who are actually nowadays fishermen, cannot fish in this type of very low water. 5 years of drought from 2013 and until 2018, when first rains actually came and fed the Sea of Galilee. Why it is so important for us, the Sea of Galilee? It used to give almost 50% of Israel water consumption, until very recently, when Israel started to desalinate water from the Mediterranean Sea. With the technology Israel have invented itself, but never used, because we didn't have the means to use that technology. Is very expensive, but nowadays we do. And today we are not pumping water from the Sea of Galilee anymore. But when we did, this kind of a draft is very, very bad, specifically the one of 1986, for example, when they've discovered, just because of the draft, the Galilee boat laying on the dry beach. So with this picture, with this image, I would like to show you for the last time on this tour, the Sea of Galilee. From a satellite view here and here. You can read some numbers about it. It's about between 250 and 209 meters below sea level, depending on the water level and how much rains of that year. The maximum depth here is about 43 meters. The circumference of the shorelines is about 53 kilometers. So I said it's about like one and a half hour to go around it. But sometimes you would find traffic because of campers coming to the shores of the Sea of Galilee. And with that, I'm ending my presentation.